Hi, I'm Wanda Huberman. I'm the Executive Director of the National Health Association. I just started doing that in January 2020 after retiring from a 30-year career with the insurance industry. I went vegan in about 1990. I didn't know anything about veganism or vegetarianism until I met my husband, Mark Huberman, in 1989. And as I learned more about it and saw health results, I went vegan probably over a 6 to 9 month time frame gradually, so that by the time we got married in 1991, I was fully vegan. Between our prior marriages, we were raising 2 kids, and our whole household was vegan by 1991. And we stayed vegan. The process was just whether it was processed food or not. So when I went vegan in 1990-ish, I didn't have a weight problem, I didn't have any health problems, and I just noticed a general all-over feeling of more energy, but not a lot of difference. I was still eating some processed foods, and I stopped that in 2011 is when I went salt, oil, sugar-free, and that's when I noticed a huge difference, especially with mental clarity. Really interesting why I am probably most engaged in being vegan. It's twofold. One is I still remember in 2012 when I was meeting with Dr. Esselstyn here at our house, and he made a comment about we all have our warranty. We all have a warranty. Some, just like products, our life warranty, some is sooner, some is later. And so now into my 60s, I realized that I really want to take the best care into longevity. So it's not about just aging gracefully, it's about aging and still being able to stay independent and active. And aside from my personal health and having the best personal health I can create, it's caring about our planet. I really care about the climate change and the planet issues for my children and grandchildren. And certainly I have a newfound love of animals. I grew up on a farm, so I was always around animals, but I didn't appreciate animals like I do now. So the importance of being vegan is really trifold. I'd say primary is health for my longevity and for the health of my family. And second would be our climate. I really think being a vegan is going to help our climate and everything we can do to not have the animal waste and just waste in general for our climate that comes with consuming animal products in lots of ways. And then third is just the kindness. There is no reason to harm animals. So those 3 are pretty strong whys for me. The importance of others being vegan probably dovetails why I personally want to be vegan. Certainly, I think we should take self-responsibility for our health. And in this time period where there's so much media and so much talk about COVID-19 and viruses and our health, there's probably not enough talk about all the comorbidities that are making people suffer more than necessary and are tying up our hospital resources. So we can take responsibility for our own health. There are so many diseases that I consider foodborne illnesses like heart disease and diabetes. So if others would understand that, and if media would talk about that so it would not seem so foreign to many people, I think the health of our country could be dramatically changed, as well as the health of our animals and the peace that that would bring to everybody. So I encourage others probably more by example. I don't bring it up unless I'm asked, but certainly in my job as the Executive Director of the National Health Association, I plan conferences and I plan cruises and travel, and I'm on social media a lot, so a lot of people are contacting me and asking me questions. I fortunately have a great referral network that I can provide people other resources if I don't have the information they're looking for. When I first became vegan and raising children, that was my first challenge. How do I have them go to school? And how do I have parties at my house with them? And talking to other vegan mothers that had been doing it longer than me provided me answers about just being involved and letting the kids be help in the planning and making it fun with things they like ice cream parties and other meals that they could help plan. So I got through that raising children okay, and then the next challenge when I went back to work and I was on the road a lot, I kind of let my guard down and I started making more compromises in how I ate, and I would eat things that were more processed, and I got away from the salt, oil, sugar, and over about an 8-year time period, I think it was so gradual, and I was working long hours, and my mother-in-law had moved in with me, and I started raising a third child that was already 9 years old, and I just kind of forgot the basic of taking care of me. And over 8 years, I realized I'd gained 50 pounds. And so that challenge is just realizing you have to stick with it consistently. And I just had to do a quick stop and get my own life back in order so that I could again begin taking care of others better. And so now that challenge is one I've faced. I've worked my way through it, and I don't allow myself to get so busy now. It's still a challenge to go out, but I prepare better, and most of the time it's okay. And if it's not, I also know it's okay not to eat and try and stay true to what I think is best for me. One of the ways that I really overcome some challenges, so I was pretty addicted to coffee. I was working long hours, I was driving a lot, so I was having those headaches. I couldn't wake up unless I had a cup of coffee, and that was frustrating. And eating more junk food and just not having the energy that I needed and the mental clarity that I wanted. I just took a break and I called Dr. Goldhammer, and who is the co-founder with his wife Jennifer Morano of True North in Santa Rosa, and kind of told him about the weight gain and the lack of mental focus and the general kind of fatigue feeling. And he had an opening, and he said, get a one-way ticket and we'll take it one day at a time. And so I applied for FMLA where I worked, and I got a one-way ticket to True North and ended up fasting for 19 to 20 days. And then I stayed another 2 or 3 weeks where I was refeeding, and I focused on going to cooking classes, learning how to be even more creative with cooking. And I worked with one of the doctors out there that focused on exercising. And what has helped over the 10 years that this has worked is it's no longer just focused on what's on my plate. It's no longer just about food. Food is what gives me the energy, but it's about having a career that means something to me. So changing to the National Health Association was a great change, and being able to exercise and work out so I feel the most fit nutritionally and physically. The other thing I really focused on when I was at True North is that the food is a salad bar. There's nothing pre-made from a box. There's nothing you're going through a drive-through. When I was on the road working, I thought I was doing okay if I did French fries and a veggie burger at Burger King, or if I went to the grocery store on my way home and I grabbed an Amy's pizza. And I was staying vegan, and I was still getting a salad to go with it, adding a tablespoon of oil with a vinaigrette dressing at a restaurant, realizing that, the empty calories in the oil versus if I could just add an avocado. It might still be some high fat, but it's real food. So now I just plan ahead. It took maybe 30 days. So I always say to people starting this journey, I make the crazy analysis to marriage. You don't have to love it every second of your life. You want to be committed to it. And that's what I think about with this journey. I don't love it every second of my life. It's more work. I can't just run out the door, but I'm committed to it. And my why makes it worth that commitment. And that's been the secret of sustaining it since 2011 and not having that roller coaster ride that I was having when I initially went vegan. So the clarity that I have now too is the importance of maintaining a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. And for me, that means not having any added salt, oil, or sugar, as opposed to the junk food diet that I was eating before, and I would call it junk food, health food, and think I was doing okay. And it was far from okay. And in fact, I was never overweight eating a standard American diet. It wasn't until I went vegan and added junk food vegan that I gained 50 pounds. And then when I left out the junk food and paid attention to whole foods that were not processed, I quickly lost the 50 pounds. So as far as any regrets, I started learning about veganism in 1989, and it was a long journey all the way till 2011 with some ups and downs. Wish I had gotten the whole picture a little bit sooner. I'm grateful that it doesn't seem like I've paid a lifelong consequence by going on my own individual journey. I'm grateful that I learned what I did when I did. Had I understood why I was doing everything sooner, I'm sure that that added health benefit would have been beneficial. I didn't do vegan before 1989 because I don't think I'd ever heard of vegan. I didn't know anybody that was vegan. I didn't even know anybody that was vegetarian. I grew up on a small farm in northeast Ohio. I spent a lot of time on my grandparents' tobacco farm in South Hill, Virginia. I have no memories of going to a grocery store growing up. We raised all our own meats. My brother worked at the dairy farm. We raised all our own vegetables. My mother canned and froze. It lasted us all year long. And for the few things she needed that we didn't raise, I guess she got them at the store on her way home from work. And I just didn't know there was any difference. Although I can tell you of the family, I can remember being really sensitive on the days that my dad took the animals to the butcher. And I didn't know why I didn't like it. I just didn't even come out of the house. I didn't like it. And when I was able to, once in a while, like on a birthday, we could pick our meal, and I intuitively would pick a meal like yogurt. I just didn't want to eat animal products. But I didn't even think about why that was. It was just, I thought I was picking yogurt because I liked it better. So as soon as I started learning about veganism and reading about it, and then I started going to the National Hygiene, well, they were called American National Hygiene Conferences. Now they're the National Health Association conferences. And I heard doctors like Joel Fuhrman and Frank Sabatino and Alec Burton and Alan Goldhammer talking. It just made so much sense. And then I started making changes in my daughter's life, and I could see why vegan was important. I personally have been diagnosed with osteoporosis, and I've had that diagnosis now for about 8 years. So I've had 3 DEXA scans, and I thought once I went whole food, plant-based, was not eating the junk food and was staying SOS free, I thought that that would clear itself up, and I'm learning that restoring bone health is not as easy as just food. And that's why I've added, I'm really consistent with strength training and cardio, and still working on improving bone density. So I think it's a bigger scientific question than I can answer. It's not like I can say, oh, if I got more calcium, I'd be okay. It's about how my body absorbs what I eat, and it's just something I'm constantly working on. In 2013, I was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, and as part of my recovery, the cancer was stage 1. They were able to remove the tumor. I didn't need any further follow-up. I credit my healthy lifestyle. It didn't spread maybe as quick as it might have. I didn't have to have any chemo or radiation, but I was Dr. Fuhrman recommended I make sure that I'm getting lots of greens and the seeds and the flax seeds. And so in order to just up that nutrient intake, I started doing smoothies, and I continue doing it to this day. So I do a smoothie, and I get probably a good 1.5 pounds of greens in, and that's my breakfast. And I do intermittent fasting, as much, not always, but probably 70%. And so I try not to eat the smoothie before 10 and sometimes 11 a.m., depending on the time of my workout. And then lunch is always a salad. Dinner always has a big salad. And then whatever fun cooked foods after that. I think if I'd been raised vegan, I would have learned this information sooner, and now what I realize is that building strong bone health really happens in your 30s and your 40s. So if I was younger, I would have paid more attention to why I needed to exercise and why I needed to stay away from the junk food, so that if I'm not feeding myself nutritionally, I'm harming myself nutritionally. So if I had known about veganism earlier, had not had that weight gain, that weight loss, I think my bone health would have been better. Not on any medications, but I do take some supplements, and I happen to like the Dr. Huberman products, and I take his Women's Daily, and he has one called Osteobiotech, which because of my osteoporosis, I take that. I don't know if I even call it a supplement. He has a mushroom chai powder, and I try and get my G-bombs, and I've upped my greens, and so I throw the mushroom supplement powder in the smoothie. And I do get my blood tested at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. And a multivitamin has B12 in it, and that's fine. If my B12 is low, I would supplement it. If my D is low, I would supplement it. But I just go based on my particular blood test. There is one other supplement I take too, again, it's based on blood testing. And I have a local MD that also follows Dr. Huberman. And so both Dr. Huberman and Dr. Paget, my local MD, look at my blood work and talk to me, and they both have advised that I take an occasional DHA EPA supplement, so I do a liquid supplement of that. Prior to the recommendation for DHA, I was not eating flaxseed and walnuts on a daily basis. Along with the recommendation for DHA was that I add the flax seeds. So I do have a tablespoon of flaxseed every day. Sometimes I add hemp and chia seeds to that, and I try and get a handful of walnuts. I'll chop it into a salad. I'm not as consistent, but I do both, and we'll keep checking. And I should say that I have a little bit of a neurological family history that causes me some extra concern that is just my personal belief. My grandfather died of a brain aneurysm. He was in his 80s, and then my mother at 67 died of the exact same type of brain aneurysm, and the doctors at the Cleveland Clinic cautioned my siblings and I that there could be a genetic component to that. And I've learned through going to the conferences and listening to the doctors that the science of epigenetics, that we can turn on and off our genes. That's another reason for me to stay, for my why, to stay on a whole food, plant-based, healthy, unprocessed diet versus a vegan diet. And it's why I focus on supplements more than, say, my husband might focus on it. So what foods I eat every day? I eat a green smoothie. The typical greens I have are kale and spinach, maybe a cucumber, alfalfa sprouts, maybe some broccoli sprouts. If I happen to have bok choy, I try and switch up the greens, but consistently I have kale and spinach in my house. If I have other greens, I throw them in there. And I will fill the 48-ounce blender. I'll put 2 cups of water, and I fill it with greens so nothing else will fit in it. And I have to blend that down a little bit. And then I'll add a tablespoon of flax, a tablespoon of hemp, a tablespoon of chia seeds. I typically will add a Brazil nut. And then I'll add a banana, and then the variants. So today I added pineapple and mango. Yesterday it was bananas and dark cherries. Tomorrow it'll probably be bananas and blueberries. It could be strawberries. I might sometimes, with the strawberries and the cherries, add a tablespoon of 100% cacao powder. And those are probably my variances that I make the most often for breakfast. So now I've got a 48-ounce smoothie. I'll give about 10 ounces of that to my husband, and I'm drinking about 38 ounces. I might drink most of it in the morning. I might leave a little bit for when I get back from my workout. I like to add beets to it, or I have beet boost powder for the nitric oxide. Sometimes I'm only eating 2 meals a day. So if I'm busy, then I'm not hungry till 4 o'clock. and 4 o'clock is when I'll eat, 4 to 5 is when I'll eat a really large salad. And I want it so large that I wouldn't have time or energy to chew it. So I bought a Holland bowl. It's just a large wooden bowl. And I have a mezzaluna. It's just where I can chop all the greens and the walnuts and the vegetables. And I chop it down into a very small chopped salad. So I'm able to get a 2-pound salad into a bowl that is sizable. I think it just brings out the flavors. I enjoy eating them more that way. And I might put a dressing on it. I often will make a mock tuna salad to get more beans into my salad. I might add tempeh for some extra protein. And then I might add an avocado or just a tahini dressing. And I like soups. I often have frozen soups in my freezer. So today I have mushroom barley soup in the fridge. So it could just be a big salad and mushroom barley soup. Or I might come home and lunch. I'm hungry after a heavy workout and I might just have a bowl of soup or just a small salad, and then I eat that larger meal for dinner. And I try and not eat before 10 in the morning and not eat after 6 at night. One meal at a time. Pick one thing that you like. So even when I wasn't doing this in the most healthiest manner, I was always getting a salad in. And so I think when I went to True North in 2011 and I didn't have a lot of health problems other than being fatigued and obese, which was certainly enough, I think the fact that I always ate a big salad. So do what you can do and do it consistently. Dr. Clapper made a statement I learned at the conference, at the National Health Association conference this week, that's really stuck with me. Do the best you can with what you have at the time you have it. You know, as I'm saying that, to make it easy and do something you can do consistently, I guess my personal journey, when I was trying to be that kind to myself and doing it 70 to 80%, traveling and adding in junk food, in retrospect, I can say I felt like I was just challenging myself and beating myself up every day. Oh, I want this, I want that, and I couldn't make a decision. After going to True North, and when I jumped in 100%, it's like without exception, I'm going to eat these kind of foods, life got so much easier. So for some people, if you have that ability to say, you know what, I'm just going to do this for 100%, and I'm going to have faith that after I do this for 30 days, these new habits are going to be great new habits. And for me, I don't know if I don't have the same addictive personalities. I don't struggle with saying I wish I could have that. I truly love these foods. And when you look in my fridge and you see all the foods, I love it. So it is a pleasure to eat this way. And I didn't find that pleasure, that desire to eat this way, that preference until I went 100%. There are so many great resources now. And that is, you know, back in 1989, I had my mother-in-law, I had my husband, there wasn't the internet, I had one conference a year, and books, of course. Now, you can look up any question on Google and you're going to find some good resources. But my primary resources are nutritionfacts.org with Dr. Greger is certainly a great resource. drfurman.com. I personally pay for his membership because it's a resource I like to have. The National Health Association has great resources on our webpage. Some of them are free, some of them for $35 a year, you're a member and you'd have access to everything. PCRM is a great resource. So there's a few websites that have great, if you're really just interested in easy cooking. And there's two that I think are great. Probably the one I'm going to the most often now is the Jarudi family, Jaroudi. Family.com. Brittany's only 30 years old and she takes traditional foods and makes them whole food, plant-based without salt, oil, and sugar, and has a boatload of free content. So if it's recipes you're looking for, her website and straightupfood.com by Kathy Fisher. They're all SOS free, they're all whole food, plant-based, and they're all pretty easy to do. You're not going to find a lot of ingredients you've never heard of. So just finding what you like and not making it too complicated. I tend to make it too complicated and people come over and I want to have these great meals and then they leave thinking they could never do what I do because for that occasion I went all out to make it special, and I need to remember keeping it simple is really the key to success. I hear a lot, I think socially. I think it's hard to feel like you fit in socially. I work in this industry over 30 years. I've rebuilt friendships and long-term relationships, and my best friends are people that are also on the same journey of whole food, plant-based living, but many people don't have that privilege. I live in a house where it's just my husband and I, and we both eat that way. So I think people quit because socially it can be very difficult. When I was working in the insurance industry, I had to go out all the time. And I eventually learned to get around that. When I traveled out of town, I just rented a car. Well, most of the time the company understood, and they would pay for it, and I would go to Whole Foods and I would just stock up and I'd eat. When everybody else was running down to happy hour, I'm scarfing down a salad in my room so that when I went to the dinner, if the food was just marginal, I could nibble at the food. I didn't even have to eat. So it's learning what your patterns are and how you can do it socially. I've had family members say to me, well, if I'm accommodating you eating whole food in my house, are you going to accommodate me eating meat in your house? And I do. So I have a lot of family that doesn't eat this. I like to host big family parties. And if they want to bring whatever they choose to bring, I tell them they're fine. I just won't cook it in my house. And I have lots of whole food, plant-based options. And this is not about forcing anybody. If I'm hosting the party and I'm preparing all the food, it's going to be whole food, plant-based. But if it's my family party with 50 people here and it's potluck, they bring whatever they want. And that's where you lead by example. And I think working on yourself, and then others will come to you when or if they want to. Maybe they'll never want to. And just accepting that you do the best you can and not making it too hard. There's a gentleman in our community, and he was physically active. He taught yoga, and I always thought he was in great health. And I don't remember what year he called me. We actually did a testimonial in the Health Science magazine about him, and he called me one day and said, Wanda, I just left the doctor's office and I have heart disease. And you give me one book to read, I'm going to read that book, and that's what I'm going to do. So tell me the right one. And I told him to read Dr. Joel Fuhrman's End of Heart Disease. He read it like within 3 days. He had the strong why with heart disease. He did 100% change. I don't know how much meat, or I really can't even tell you what his diet beforehand was. But he made the changes based on that book. And his very next doctor's appointment, I think 3 months later, his numbers were reversed. His doctor now is a member of the National Health Association. He's a strong member of the National Health Association, doing fantastic, and speaks often about that conversation when he called me and said, give me one book to read. No, I cannot imagine. Before I was fully vegan, the last thing I quit eating was salmon, because I thought, oh, that's not as bad. And then I learned about the mercury in the oceans, and I honestly quit because I thought the quality of that food no longer was right. If I could get wild caught or something, I thought maybe it would be okay. And then as I learned more about animal rights and thought about what's happening to the fish, it's no different than what's happening to the cows or chickens and the health of our ocean. So no, there is no reason in today's society. There are so many substitutes. When I was doing this, I couldn't go to Trader Joe's and buy soy milk made with just soy. There are so many things to get wherever you go now that I can't imagine any reason. And after doing a 20-day fast, I have been in places where I might go for 2 or 3 meals with no good options, and it's okay. You're not going to starve. Right now, my favorite quote is the one I said earlier from Dr. Clapper. Do the best you can with what you have when you have it. I hope anybody watching this will really maybe watch a couple of documentaries, whether it's Forks Over Knives or whether it's A Prayer for Compassion. Look on some of those resource sites and just spend a little bit of time learning. I think when you make yourself realize what you're doing to your body and to our planet and to the animals, the choice is undeniable that this is what's best for our health and the future of our children and grandchildren. It is definitely easier for the child in my experience. So I've had the unique experience of raising 3 girls at 3 different stages of their life. The oldest child was from my first marriage, so she had 6 years of being raised on a traditional diet because she was born in 1983 and I didn't know about this till 1989. And so difficult for her. And she's still surrounded by a lot of family, and she is not choosing veganism or even vegetarianism. And I love all 3 of my children unconditionally, and I'll support her, and hoping she has her light bulb moment like I had mine. And the second child, who is 36, was raised from birth as a vegan, and those choices are just easier for her. So I think there is an innate something that when you've never had meat and you've never had dairy, that at least in my limited perspective in my family, that seems to have been an easier choice. And then the third child I raised came to live with me when she was 9, and she's somewhere in between the older 2. And they know what I do. I am pretty sure they all know exactly why Mark and I do what we do. And I trust that they'll make the decisions that are best for them, and hopefully it'll be vegan in the future. So of the 3 of them, fortunately, none of them are on any medications. None of them have any real health issues to speak of. The oldest one has her weight struggles from eating a standard American diet. She had weight struggles when I met Mark. And so when I learned about this as a baby, she was overweight. So I think there's studies out there now, and I haven't read all of them, but there are studies about how even the mother being pregnant and what she's eating and that what you're giving to your child from a very young age and how that protects them. And so I don't know if that's why the weight is harder, but the other 2 don't. The middle child that was raised from vegan doesn't have those struggles, and the youngest one hasn't really had that struggle yet. The youngest one is probably the most physically active, although my middle child in New York certainly does a lot of biking and walking. So definitely easier if the kids know why they're doing what they're doing as they're growing up, and definitely easier, like my husband, if taste is a learned behavior. So if they learn to love it. The interesting thing was when my youngest child that came to live with us, she would come to visit a lot as a child. And I can remember at 3 years old, she was being raised on a standard American diet. But she'd run into my house and it'd be like, "Aunt Wanda, where's the celery?" She always raided my refrigerator for the celery. And other little children in the neighborhood, they come over to my house just to look in my refrigerator. They want to see what fruits I have, and I can make them watermelon popsicles and let them help me make nice cream in the Vitamix. Kids like whole foods, in my experience, if that's what they're given. I think raising them with unconditional love is as important as food. And if the children believe that they are being loved and well supported, they're going to trust what they're being taught. And if the example is true and they're not watching something that maybe is true part of the time. So I think kids are smart and they get real love and they get real examples.